What's going on, everybody? You see a Jaguar back with GenJag.com, and the NFL draft is within 3 weeks away, and there are a ton of different positions that the Jaguars could potentially address in the top rounds of the draft. Now, in this video, I want to give you my top 5 needs of the Jaguars roster as it stands. And when I do this list, I am not necessarily saying that our number 1 need needs to go round 1, or our number 2 need needs to go round 2. I basically look at the roster and say, okay, this position, it needs the most immediate upgrade, then this position, then this position. Because, for example, my number 1 need that the Jaguars have, I don't think we're going to address until rounds 3 or 4. And, you know, my number 5 position of need, I could see us getting in the top 2 rounds. So that's kind of how I look at it. Now, in this video, I want to go in order of number 1 through 5. Let's get it. So the number 1 position of need for the Jaguars is an outside linebacker. So more specifically, the strong side linebacker spot. Now, there's a few things that we do know about the Jaguars. One of those is that Telvin Smith and Myles Jack are virtual locks to be our 2 starting linebackers at the middle linebacker spot and the will linebacker spot. And they're pretty much locked to be in there in the nickel package when there's only 2 linebackers on the field. And another thing that we know about the Jaguars linebacking core is that it is not very deep with talent. You know, you have guys behind Myles Jack and Telvin Smith like Blair Brown. You also have like Donald Payne. You know, there's really not too much depth at that position, and it seems like every other week we are basically cycling in and out another practice squad guy. So our number 1 position of need is that strong side linebacker spot. Now, the big wild card in this whole thing is Blair Brown. Now, the Jaguars drafted Blair Brown in the 5th round of the 2017 NFL draft. You know, we just got done with his rookie season, and that's a guy that the Jaguars drafted with a top pick in the 5th round. So they probably had about a 3rd round value, or, you know, at worst a 4th round value on the guy. So, you know, it's a big unknown because we really didn't see him play much that last season. He didn't really get in there until Telvin Smith was in the whole concussion protocol thing. And, of course, he only got about 30% of snaps, being that, you know, he was getting off the field on nickel coverages. So it's kind of a thing that only the Jaguars coaching staff and front office really know much about the guy, because it's kind of hard to speculate how well he is or how good he is when we saw him in limited snaps as a rookie. So you never know. If the Jaguars do have trust in Blair Brown, he may be that guy. But however, you know, we could still definitely upgrade from that position. You know, get a guy maybe 3rd, 4th round. Hopefully maybe Shaquem Griffin or something like that. But, you know, we'll see what we do at that strong side linebacker spot. Now, the number 2 position of need is the tight end position. Now, of course, we have returning on our roster guys like Ben Koyack and James O'Shaughnessy. We brought in guys like Austin Seferian-Jenkins and Niles Paul. And we also recently had depart Mercedes Lewis. So this is a spot that, you know, I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins will be a huge, play at that tight end position. I think he's a huge grab for the Jaguars. But the other guy that the Jaguars got, Niles Paul, he's mainly just for special teams. You know, he's a former special teams captain that for the Washington Redskins. He also, when Dave Caldwell was talking about him, he alluded to how they expect him to line up at tight end, wide receiver, fullback. You know, if you really expect to get a lot of production out of a player, you want to stick him at one spot and make him master that spot. And obviously, you know, he's seen as more of a, you know, special teams guy. So when you look at it, you know, you have Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Ben Koyack, James O'Shaughnessy. You know, you could definitely upgrade from those, you know, other 2 guys. So, you know, I expect the Jaguars to potentially get a tight end who is as balanced as possible. You know, maybe like a Hayne Hurst kind of guy who can put his hand in the dirt and play, you know, and be able to block guys, but also line up in the slot position and catch some passes, you know. I really don't think that the coaches will bring in a guy who doesn't really run block well, just because, as we all know, that's our team's bread and butter. Now, our number 3 position of need I have is the wide receiver position. Now, the Jaguars have 4 guys who are pretty good at the wide receiver position. You know, you have recently acquired guy like Donte Moncrief. You also re-signed Marquise Lee, and then you also had two rookies two second-round guys just came out their pretty productive rookie years in Keelan Cole and Dede Westbrook. You know, you look at those guys and, you know, you think you have a pretty solid receiving core. However, we recently had Al Robinson depart from the team. And I know we didn't get anything out of Al Robinson last season besides a first down reception. However, you know, we went into that season expecting to have a number one wide receiver, and we didn't have that. And I think it definitely hurt us going into the season. You know, when you look at our roster, you don't really have many guys that can turn into a wide receiver number one in my eyes. You know, I don't think Marquise Lee is that guy. You know, Keelan Cole and Dede Westbrook, I see them as like high-end wide receiver number two type of guys. And the only really guy that could turn into a wide receiver number one is Donte Moncrief. However, Donte Moncrief, we're kind of just renting him. He's on a one-year contract, so he's more of a stopgap kind of player for a guy to potentially come in and be that wide receiver number one and really just take over after Donte Moncrief kind of departs. So, you know, Donte Moncrief, he has the measurables to kind of be that wide receiver number one, but the last couple years he hasn't really produced. You know, he's been injured. You know, you don't know because he had his best years under Andrew Luck, so was he a product of Andrew Luck? We don't know, but, you know, he's on that one-year rent-a-deal kind of thing, so, you know, I could see us getting a potential, like, big body wide receiver in this draft that could, you know, flourish into that number one wide receiver role. Now, the Jaguars' number 4 position of need, and this might surprise you guys a little bit, I have the running back position. And, you know, all offseason and stuff like that, we talk about how we can improve the run game. You know, you talk about bringing in guys like Andrew Norwell. You know, you talk about the development of left tackle Cam Robinson. You know, you talk about how we have our really good running back in Leonard Fournette that we expect to do big things for us. However, let's not forget about the guys when we're talking about improving the run game, the guys who actually carry the rock. And right now, we only have 3 running backs on a roster. That's Leonard Fournette, TJ Yeldon, and Corey Grant. And, you know, quite frankly, Leonard Fournette, let's not kid ourselves. One flaw of him dating back to his college years has been that he gets injured a good amount. You know, it's just kind of comes from his running style. You know, his ankle gets twisted up a little bit. And, you know, he missed a few games last season because of that. Now, if Leonard Fournette were to go down, you know, all we have is TJ Yeldon and Corey Grant. And, you know, none of those guys are going to be able to carry a, you know, big bulk of carries. You know, TJ Yeldon has proved that he can't. And, you know, Corey Grant just doesn't have the body type, I don't think, to be able to do that. You know, I've always kind of undersold Corey Grant a little bit. He's kind of proved me wrong a lot. But, you know, I still just think that he's more of a, you know, gadget kind of player that will be able to help you out, maybe get 5 to 7 carries a game is right for him. So, you know, you wonder what the best kind of running back to have to complement or to be able to be our running back too. Now, do we want to have a guy that, you know, a Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara kind of combo where, you know, Ingram is more of that downhill kind of dude while Kamara can go in there and get a little shifty on you? You know, do you want something like that? You know, something like in Tennessee where now they have Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis backing him up. Do we want something like that where we have a really good complement? Or do we want something where, you know, if Leonard Fournette does get injured, we have another big bruising running back to come in there and be able to really pound you, you know, kind of like a guy like Bo Scarborough out of Alabama. So what kind of player do we want to be able to be the running back to? You know, guy with different qualities, guy with kind of different. I kind of would rather have, you know, a guy that's a little shiftier, you know, try to bring in like a Kamara, bring in like a Tevin Coleman to the Devontae Freeman kind of thing. That's kind of what I'd rather have, just to bring a different skill set to the table. Now, a number 5 position of need. Now, when you look at the Jaguars roster right now, you know, this isn't somebody that that's really going to plug in, I don't think, and start week 1. However, I could definitely see the Jaguars going after, and I think they will go after one of these in the top 2, maybe 3 rounds of the draft, and that is to get an offensive tackle. And, you know, not necessarily offensive tackle, but maybe even an offensive, you know, guard or something like that. Just the best available offensive lineman kind of thing that fits the value of where you're drafting. Because, you know, we have Jeremy Parnell as our right tackle. You know, he's 32 years old, coming off kind of an injury. You know, he's only going to get older. And you also have AJ Cann at the right guard position, who is coming into a contract season and, you know, has been a little bit below average in his NFL career. You know, he's had his ups and downs. So, you know, definitely draft a guy, develop him, see what position he fits into better to be able to, you know, going into the 2019 season. And you could build a really good offensive line. You know, I mean, like, if you have a good offensive line, I mean, the game starts and ends in the trenches. I mean, the team with the dominant trenches more than likely wins the game. I mean, you look at the Dallas Cowboys. You know, they have a very, very good offensive line, and they had 3 different running backs rush for over 1,000 yards in 3 consecutive seasons. So, you know, if we can get a good offensive line behind a guy like Leonard Fournette, maybe bring in another running back too, this offensive line and our offense could be lethal for years to come. Because you can't forget, when you look at the trying to upgrade an offense, you know, you see that you have wide receivers, you have tight ends, running backs, you know, quarterback, but 5 out of your 11 starters are coming from the offensive line. And if everything goes as planned, those players play every single offensive snap. So the offensive line can never be undervalued. So yeah, those are my top 5 positions of need going into the 2018 NFL Draft. Again, this doesn't mean that, you know, since linebacker is my #1 position of need, that I think we should draft a linebacker round 1. Because I think that would be stupid, as that linebacker would only get about 30% of snaps. But a guy to get, you know, in a 3rd or 4th round or something like that, depending how the Jags kind of feel about Blair Brown. Now, with these positions, I really think that the Jaguars will probably draft 4 out of 5 of these, you know, some kind of combination of 4 different of these positions in the top 4 rounds of the NFL Draft. So it'll be exciting to see what the Jaguars do. The Jaguars have, looking back on it, has some pretty good drafts over the last few years. So hopefully we can continue to get that thing going. You know, the team is built through the draft. You get guys on cheap contracts to be able to make it so where if you lose a player and, you know, through free agency because they get too expensive, you can have a guy who can replace him with, you know, same kind of production but on a really, really cheaper deal. So yeah, that's the video. Hope you guys like it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is UCF Jaguar with GenJag.com, and we out.